The underclassmen are on their way to the NFL draft. More are announcing all the time. We're going to go through the latest announcements. Who needs in? What's going on in Tennessee with their pass game? And a couple of either-ors. Welcome to Locked On NFL Draft.
You are Locked On NFL Draft, your daily podcast covering the NFL Draft. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another episode of the Locked On NFL Draft Show. I am your host, former NFL and AFL defensive back, Eric Crocker. And of course, as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Ryan Tracy of Rogue Analytics. He is at Ryan Tracy NFL on Twitter. I am at Eric_Crocker on Twitter. We want to thank you for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen of the day. And also let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. All right. It's presented by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is a daily fantasy made easy. Pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Picks projections, you can win up to 10 times your money on your entry. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match of up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. That's prizepicks.com/promo code Locked On. Ryan, we're talking about some of the guys who have started to declare for the draft since the 10th. And we have gone over some guys. We'll get a little deeper into a couple of guys I like to talk about. Jalin Hyatt, Cedric, Tillman, receivers out of Tennessee. But let's start with some of these guys. All right, you got Clark Phillips, cornerback out of Utah. And I got a chance to watch him a ton going up against USC. He was never overwhelmed by the weapons that USC had, especially at the receiver position. Not as big of a guy, but when you talk about toughness, physicality, twitch, I think there's some people that might like him. And I think right now, as I look at my rankings, he's climbing towards potentially being CB1, even though he doesn't have the ideal skill set and length or ideal height, length, that type of thing. But as far as like speed, twitch, change of direction, feet, scrappiness, toughness, he has all those things. And I think it stands out every time I watch him.
Yeah, for sure. He feels like his arm length is going to be a little bit better than I think proportionality to the rest of his body. I'm really interested. One of the few guys that I want to see his measurements, his weigh in to get an idea of what his total package is going to be, because I think that changes his eval a lot this particular year. I'm not ready to call him a nickel only either. Are you?
No, not at all. And I think that's the first thing a lot of people think about when you see someone who's a little bit more vertically challenged, right? It's like, oh, he's got to be a nickel. Like, no, you can be shorter play on the outside. I mean, look at some of the guys in the NFL right now, some of the better coverage guys, Jair Alexander. If you can run, then it doesn't matter that, oh, you're only 5'10". I say only 5'10", but, 5'10" back in the day, that wasn't a short cornerback, but I think Richard Sherman, he kind of messed everything up. Being 6'3", everybody wanted to kind of get the Richard Sherman, the Brandon Browner, the Antonio Cromartie, those really long, lengthy corners. And there's a place for those guys. But I think the NFL right now, especially since they're starting to go towards a little bit more quarters coverage, you've seen a lot of quarters cover 4. I think you could see kind of a change in guard of maybe you don't have to have that super tall, long, lengthy cornerback. You can have a guy like Clark Phillips who isn't as big, but still twitched up and can read concepts and react extremely well.
Yeah, and that's really what it comes down to. He's one of the bigger names that's come out recently, particularly at the DB level. But there's a couple of guys that the Tennessee wide receivers, we're going to talk about them specifically in the next segment. Myles Murphy, we talked about him yesterday. You got Raheem Jarrett, the wide receiver from Maryland, came out. Trenton Simpson, the Clemson linebacker. I think that was pretty expected. Antonio Johnson, the safety from Texas A&M. Any of those guys stand out to you as like, hey, I got to go look at them a little bit closer right now?
Well, yeah, Antonio Johnson. And I've watched him out there at the safety position. Sometimes when you take that initial look at safety, maybe sometimes there's things that don't quite jump off the screen. And they've had really good safeties back there at Texas A&M, and what they've been doing is sending guys to the NFL. But Antonio Johnson, that's a guy whose name came up early and often throughout this process. And, watching him, I was definitely intrigued. You see the size, that's there. So now it's just, all right, does he have that necessary twitch? I talked about at the NFL level, going towards a lot of cover 4. What does that mean? That means safety is out in space, having to match vertically pushing routes by receivers. Can he defend that? Can he cover that? Can he turn and run with those guys? That's going to be the first thing I look for when I cut on this film.
Yeah, it's also a good case for, hey, can you take X corner and make him a safety, knowing if you're going to be in that scheme? I think there's a couple of guys in this class that are going to fall into that. A couple of older announcements that stand out to me. I missed Chris Rodriguez coming out. So now it's not just Will Levis leaving. It's Chris Rodriguez as well from Kentucky, the running back. BJ Ojulari, we talked about him briefly yesterday. Trey Tucker from Cincinnati, the wide receiver, came out as well. And Tank Bigsby, the running back. The running backs, I think this class feels to me like it's going to be a couple of guys at the top and a big group that's going to be in the middle rounds. I think a lot of teams are going to get decent guys. They're going to give them yardage out of this class.
I think Chris Rodriguez, he's a guy that people are going to start to catch on a little late, right? He missed a lot of this season due to certain things. And once he got back in there, you'd see like, man, Kentucky, they really missed him. Now, it didn't equate to a bunch of wins, but when you see a guy who in that offense, you can, put his foot in the ground, get north right now. He finishes and falls forward. He gets a lot of what I like to call leak yardage. You see that a lot with him being able to take that contact on, knock guys back, and just enough breakaway speed. Not that super bursty, explosive guy, but has the ability to kind of run away from guys in short areas. So he's a guy who, we talk about Bijan Robinson, who he has declared as well. We talk about the kid out of Alabama. There's a lot of other guys, Zach Charbonnet. We'll see what happens with him. Rodriguez. This is a guy that you should not overlook.
I like the way your head's at, and that sets me up for later. We do got to cover those Tennessee wide receivers. So let's, on the backside of this, let's make sure we take a long, hard look at them because they're both coming out as of today.
But first, I want to talk to you a little bit about Simply Safe. And in an emergency, 24/7 professional monitoring agents, that's what you need. Guys are going to react, and they're going to use fast and protect. All right, they got the technology exclusively from Simply Life to capture a critical evidence and verify that the threat is real, so you can get a higher priority police response, and you want that fast, right? Simply Safe is a whole home security with the advanced sensors for every single room, window, and door in your home. HD security cameras all around from the inside and outside. Smart ways to detect motion that alert only you when there is a threat. And we're talking about a real threat. And even the hazard sensors that detect fires, floods, and other threats that could be potentially harming your home. The professional monitoring service is 24/7 and only costs you $1 a day. That's less than the price of a traditional home security system. With the top-rated Simply Safe app, you can stay in, complete control of everything that's going on with your system. You can arm it. You can disarm it. You can unlock it for guests, access your cameras. You can adjust system settings anytime, anywhere. So don't miss out on your chance to save big on my favorite security system around. Get 40% off any new system at simplysafe.com/LockedOnNFL today. That's simplysafe.com/LockedOnNFL. There's no safe like Simply Safe. We want to thank you for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen of the day. And for your second listen of the day, check out the Locked On Sports Today, from the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports. Go beyond the scoreboards and behind the scenes with the local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. That's Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast. All right, Ryan, let's talk about these Tennessee receivers. And we watched Jalin Hyatt, and it came on late. And I think he had a real big coming out party against Alabama where he went for 5 touchdowns. Everybody's like, who is this guy? First round pick. He's got to be getting drafted high. He's killing them. And that was an amazing moment. I just the atmosphere, what it did for Hendon Hooker. And we'll see how he recovers from his injury. But just overall, it was like Hyatt, amazing. And he did a lot of this without Cedric Tillman. We'll get to Cedric Tillman in a second. But Hyatt, where is he at as a prospect for you? He's slightly built, 5'11", 180, and guys that are that slim say, hey, you got to be a burner. And what he at least put on film is he is definitely a long strider. I think he's going to run fast. His skill set, and you want to know how does it translate to the NFL, they did a lot of things to really help him, put him in advantageous situations for him. lining him up, doing switch releases, getting him versus off coverage, and then him having the speed to run by guys? Can he line up on the outside and just beat man? Can he line up in the slot and just beat man, which he'll face in the NFL? Am I overreacting to those things right there? Does it not matter? Because, hey, he just wins, and the NFL will figure out a way to just have him win consistently. What are some of your thoughts on Jalin Hyatt, the receiver out of Tennessee?
Well, a friend of mine coaches not terribly far from Knoxville, but his line for him is that line from the old original Top Gun movie. He calls him "Where'd Who go?" because he just seemed to get lost in some of those plays. Now, the forgotten guy, and if you sleep on him a couple of steps, and he's got an acceleration going, like you said, when he gets to those long strides, he'll blow right past you. So I think all of your questions are legitimate. Those are the same questions I have. I can't see him really right now being a guy that I can line up at 3 positions in 11 personnel and ask him to do everything. I feel like he's got to have a package right now. The question becomes is, can I get enough off of the tape that tells me I think he can get there where he can do everything for me? That's going to be one of my criteria for him. But right now, I don't think so. And that, for me, makes me wonder if he can be in that top 50 to top 32 range, because I don't think he's 31 or above or 32 or above.
Well, the other guy, Cedric Tillman, he was the big name guy heading into the season. Obviously, he had to deal with some injuries that kind of kept him out for a little bit longer than he would like. And when he came back, it was like, okay, he's cool. Wasn't creating much separation, but you see him make some plays, especially with Hendon Hooker tossing the ball to him. But we watched him last season, and Cedric Tillman was terrific. He was a guy that was a vertical threat. He had his biggest games and the biggest moments against the biggest teams. And, I mean, torched those teams, going for 150 plus on some legit secondaries. But, again, missing a lot of this season, how do you think that might hurt his stock? I mean, this is a bigger body receiver. The 49ers have a guy by the name of Juwan Jennings. He played there. He was a bigger body guy, played more in the slot. I don't think Cedric Tillman is that type of guy. I think actually Cedric Tillman has more ability than Juwan Jennings, who ended up running a 4.7, got drafted late, I think 7th round. Tillman, I expect him to go at some point day 2, but he was potentially looking like a day 1 guy before the injury happened.
Well, yeah, and just like everybody else who goes through this process, the medicals are going to be the thing that affects your outcome the most. But I agree with you. I have him as a day 2 guy. And unlike Hyatt, he's a guy that we can point to a bigger girth of performance. And I think you have to take some of that in from last season because of the injury. I think he can get back to there. I agree with you. I think he's probably going to run faster than Juwan. And I think he can be a lineup X right now and be functional in the league. Is he going to blow everybody's doors off? No, but I think he's got a little bit more twitch than what we saw this last season as the season before, and I'm relying on that as part of the evaluation. Is he fully healthy? I don't believe so, but where he is on that spectrum will give teams the idea of, can he get back to that? Can he surpass that? I think that he can, and I think he's going to go a little bit earlier than a lot of folks think.
Quentin Johnston, Jackson Smith and Jigma, Keyshawn Butte, he decided to go back to college. I thought that was smart. Jordan Addison. There are a lot of receivers that are projected to go pretty high, but Cedric Tillman, I think he's going to be up there. I think he's going to be in that kind of Zay Flowers range out of Boston College, kind of Xavier Hutchinson from Iowa State. That's another guy, kind of in that range there. The receiver group is going to be very intriguing. We're definitely going to dive more into those guys soon, but coming up next, we got some either or questions to ask each other. All right. So before we get to that, I want to let you guys know about the NHTSA and how y'all need to drive sober or get pulled over. Let's say you're hanging out with some friends and you're putting back a few drinks, and a few becomes a few too many. And as the evening comes to an end and people start to head out, you think of calling for a ride, and there's all kind of ride services that you can call right from your phone. Uber, Lyft, there's plenty of them. But no, you don't want to call any of those because you live nearby. So you feel like, you know what, I can make it home. It's no big deal. Okay, right? No, it is a big deal. What are the odds that you'll get pulled over anyway, right? That's what you're telling yourself. And even so, what's the worst that could happen? Your insurance goes up, you lose your license, you lose your job, you total your car, you kill somebody. All right? Everyone knows about the risk of drinking and driving. The results are tragic and often very deadly. However, that still doesn't stop everyone from getting behind the wheel while under the influence. That's why police officers are out there right now looking for impaired drivers on our roads to keep life safe. So, if you are okay to drive after a few drinks, think again. You're not. Play it safe and plan ahead to get a ride. It only takes one mistake to change your life or someone else's forever. Drive sober or get pulled over. All right, Ryan. We got some either or jumping off, and we're going to throw it to you first. What do you got for me?
I'm gonna go out west because this is something that I've been going back and forth with, and I think you like both of these guys enough to feel like this is a legit question, but I'm going to pose it in terms of where I think they should go. So, one guy, top 15, one guy, 25 to 32. I think they're both first rounders, or they're going to come out with first round grades. One is Christian Gonzalez from Oregon. I think he should maybe go up top. So if you say you got to take him by 15 or Clark Phillips at 30, which do you take?
Oh, that's tough, man, because, oh, man. Gonzalez, height, weight, speed, awareness, playmaking skills, ball skills, it's all there. I don't think there's any questions there. So I'm going to have to go with Mr. Gonzalez on that one out of Oregon. He's been terrific, man. And, again, there's just a couple plays that stick out in my mind so much and how he's covered so much space. He has the length, and I talked about how you don't have to have that size, but if you do have a guy who has that plus athleticism, that ability, and has the size as well, it's hard to let that go. So I'm going to go with Gonzalez.
I like that. I won't disagree because I do think he is the bigger prospect. It all comes into value, and I think it's going to be about fit too. If you're looking for the second half of your corner duo, I think he's at 15 all day long. I think you can get away with that. If you are looking for what a lot of teams, like you said earlier, with Clark Phillips, is going to think that he's a nickel only. I think it's going to take a team to take a chance on him playing outside if he's going to get up out of that like very, very bottom end of the first round. I think it might happen. He's got a lot of eval to go, so let's see what happens with him.
All right, so I'm going to stay with the Chris, but I'm going to go in another direction. We got Chris Rodriguez, running back out of Kentucky. Either or. Chris Rodriguez or Zach Charbonnet out of UCLA. Who are you taking?
No, come on. This is, Rodriguez came on.
Backs. I try to match you up with a couple backs that are very similar in the sense of how their styles a little bit, but I want to see which way you were leaning.
Yeah, you did a good job with that. And he really did come on when he came back from the injury. The injury's a little bit, it's not like the main thing, but it's a little bit in the back of my head. You know what I mean? But when it comes to it, just watching Zach Charbonnet, he's the guy that gets me excited about running offense. And I think he does that for his linemen. I think he does that for everybody. Whereas I think Rodriguez is sometimes a little bit more of a surprise. Like, oh, he was able to do that. It wasn't the expectation. And I don't know if that plays into the guys that are blocking for him, but it does for where I'm sitting. So I will take Zach Charbonnet, and I think he is going to be in this conversation for the rest of the league as well. So we talked about two Tennessee receivers. I want to take one of those. And the guy that was injured, Cedric Tillman, versus your guy, Johnston from TCU. Very good size. One is clearly the deeper threat in Johnson. One is, I think, more of a steady presence, a consistent player, not only over the course of these last two seasons, but in general, projecting to the next league. Do you want an X that's more consistent? Do you want the deep threat from that size, Tillman or Johnson for you?
Well, I train athletes. I also train receivers. And one thing I feel like, man, I'm going to coach this guy up to do everything I need. So let me take the 6'4" guy who's a flyer and takes the top off of a defense. And I can say, you know what? I'm going to teach you how to win a little bit more consistently in that short to intermediate range. So I'm going with Mr. Johnston on this one. I like the question, though. That was a good one because I like Cedric Tillman. And but I think Johnston and how he finished the year, this is a guy who, I don't want to say I was skeptical, but I had questions. I'm like, man, is he for sure a first round guy? I think he has solidified himself as a legit first round guy. But I have a question for you now. And we're going to stick to the defensive line, right? We talked a lot about DNs. One guy that we didn't really mention, Iowa State's Will McDonald. Every time I watched him, big time playmaker there on that defensive line. 6'4", 250 pounds, fluid mover. He plays strong. Are you taking him or the upside of B.J. Ojulari out of LSU?
That is a great question.
Or B.J. Ojulari?
On the board, BJ is higher right now, but he has, I think, a more specific usage. I think he's got to be a 3-4 OLB. I don't know that I can line him up on the edge and feel like he can take on the run, set the edge, do everything that a 4-3 defensive end does. So I feel like McDonald's a little bit more versatile. And if I'm picking for the Kansas City Chiefs, which the team that I cover all the time, they're going to play a 4-man front every down. So I got to go with McDonald in terms of fit there. But for most of the league, I think Ojulari is the better player. For me, I would change the defense if I had to. I would go to a 3-man front because I think BJ is going to be something special at the next level. I'll take Ojulari. Okay, well, that does it for us today. Those are our either-ors. Let us know what you want to get a question in. Leave a comment here on YouTube or in the Spotify reviews. Make sure you like, sub, and hit the bell here on the YouTube side of it. We appreciate your time today. Thanks for making us your first listen. Check on Locked On Sports today for your next one. You can get every major sport in one feed anywhere that you get podcasts, including Odyssey. Check that out. Thanks for listening to us today. We'll be back with you tomorrow.